Tonight, the road disappears beneath a cold medieval fog, and every step may hide something waiting just beyond the torchlight. In a world of muddy lanes, locked town gates, haunted marshes, suspicious monks, and bells drifting through the mist. Fog is not just weather, it is a warning. It hides thieves, sickness, lost paths, and fears no one can fully explain. So before we step into the grey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy calm, mysterious medieval stories. Now, pull your cloak tighter, listen for the distant bell, and let the fog lead us into the night. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing ankle-deep in brown road mud before the western gate of a medieval town, with cold stone rising above you, damp straw clinging to your cloak, smoke caught low in the rafters of the gatehouse beyond, and distant bells trembling through river mist like someone tapping silver in a dream. Your boots are heavy, your fingers are stiff, torchlight shakes on the wet walls, and the breath of nearby horses steams into the dusk as though even the animals are quietly regretting the journey. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. The road behind you has been nothing but ruts, puddles, bare hedges, and the occasional crow judging your posture from a branch, and you begin to suspect that you probably would not last a week out here, not without warmer socks, better luck, and a much stronger relationship with turnip soup. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening from some safer, warmer place, leave a comment with your location and local time, so this foggy road may know where you're resting tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You draw your cloak tighter beneath your chin and watch the fog move under the gate arch, not rolling exactly, but breathing, slow and pale, as though the river below the town has climbed out of its bed to look for shelter. The town wall is made of old grey stone, patched here and there with newer work, and the mortar shines dark where the evening damp has found it. Above you, two guards lean over the parapet, their iron caps catching the last thin light. One of them has wrapped a strip of wool around his neck against the cold. The other holds a lantern out from the wall. Though the flame gives little help, the mist swallows it almost at once, turning its glow into a dull yellow blur. Ahead, the gatehouse waits with its oak doors open just wide enough for travellers to pass through one at a time. A hanging chain creaks softly somewhere above. The portcullis teeth are raised, black and pointed, like the jaw of some enormous beast pretending to be polite. You join a small cluster of latecomers gathered before the toll board, a wool merchant with two pack horses, a woman carrying a covered basket that smells faintly of smoked fish, a pilgrim with a pewter badge sewn to his hat, and a thin boy leading a donkey with the expression of someone who has had a long day and absolutely no say in the matter. The fog makes everyone uncertain. It turns faces into half-faces and footsteps into guesses. A cartwheel groans somewhere behind you, but you cannot see the cart until it lurches out of the whiteness, tilted to one side, its driver muttering prayers to St. Christopher and less holy remarks about road maintenance. No one can quite agree whether fog like this brings thieves closer or merely makes honest people look suspicious. The merchant says thieves love weather that hides a blade. The pilgrim says weather is weather and sin needs no assistance. The donkey sneezes, which seems like the most reasonable contribution so far. At the gate table, the toll collector sits beneath a little awning of patched canvas. He wears fingerless gloves and keeps his account marks on a wax tablet, because parchment is too dear for the muddy arithmetic of travellers. Beside him lies a bundle of iron keys, each one large enough to look important even when doing nothing. He asks what you carry, where you come from, and whether you mean to sell anything within the walls. His candle gutters in the damp air, the flame bending every time the gate passage breathes. You see rushes scattered over the stone floor behind him, darkened by boots and dripping cloaks, and you catch the smell of wet wool, old smoke, horse sweat, and onion pottage from somewhere deeper in town. You answer as simply as you can, because simple answers cost less in places like this. The toll collector squints at you as though the fog may have filled your pockets with undeclared goods. Around his neck hangs a little charm made of rowan twig tied with red thread, tucked beside a dull lead token stamped with the image of a saint. Some swear that rowan keeps away ill-wishing and wandering spirits, especially on nights when the air turns white and the road forgets its own edges. Others say the charm is mostly useful for making toll collectors feel braver while overcharging peasants. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the man trusts the saint, the twig, or the small knife hidden under his ledger. A bell rings from within the town, slow and hollow. Not the great monastery bell, not yet, but a smaller parish bell calling the last tradesman indoors before full dark. Its sound travels strangely through the fog. It seems near, then far, then near again, as if the bell itself has lost the street. The guards glance outward when it rings, toward the road behind you, and for a moment you understand why gates close early in such weather. Fog hides holes in the road, yes, and flooded ditches, and the slick stones that can turn an ankle. But it also hides men with hungry eyes. It hides fevered travellers who do not yet know what they carry. It hides wolves bold enough to nose near the outer rubbish heaps. It hides the difference between a neighbour and a stranger until the stranger is too close. The woman with the smoked fish crosses herself when a shape moves near the ditch. It is only a dog, lean and mud-coloured, with one ear folded wrong and a burr caught in its tail. It steps from the mist, looks at the gathered company, and decides, with the confidence of all road dogs, that you are the person most likely to drop food. You do not drop food. The dog follows anyway. This is how alliances are made in the Middle Ages, poorly, silently, and usually involving fleas. At last the toll collector waves you through. You duck beneath the gate arch, where water drips from the stones above in slow cold beads. The passage smells of soot and damp straw. The walls are scratched with old Mark's initials, merchant signs, a crude little cross, and what might be a ship or a very ambitious turnip. A guard at the inner side pushes a brazier closer with his boot, and the coals glow red beneath grey ash. You hold your hands toward the heat for the briefest moment, feeling the sting come back into your fingers. Beyond the gate, the town opens in fragments. Timbered houses lean toward one another across the narrow street, their upper stories almost meeting in the fog. Lanterns hang from hooks, shutters close. Somewhere, a woman laughs softly behind a door, and somewhere else a child is called indoors before the mist puts cold teeth in the chest. As old mothers say, the road beneath you changes from country mud to town filth straw, spilled ale, cabbage leaves, hoof prints, and dark water running along the gutter. It is not elegant, but it is shelter, and shelter is a kind of luxury when night lowers itself over the wall. You move slowly, guided by torchlight and the sound of voices. Behind you, the gate begins to close with a long wooden groan. The dog slips in just before the doors meet, proud of its timing and indifferent to municipal rules. The great bar falls into place. Outside, the fog presses against the town like a pale hand against glass. Inside, candles are being lit, pottage is being stirred, and every traveller is pretending not to wonder what might still be walking the road unseen. The gate closes behind you with a heaviness that settles into the bones, and for a little while you stand in the covered passage of the gatehouse, neither fully outside nor properly within the town. It is the kind of place made for waiting stone underfoot, oak beams overhead, old rushes crushed into the corners, and a brazier glowing as if it is trying very hard to remember summer. Travellers gather close to it without admitting that they are gathering close. Each person merely happens to drift nearer, one careful step at a time, until everyone's hands hover over the coals like pale moths. The fog has followed you through the arch. It coils along the floor and thins around ankles, making the boots of strangers appear before their faces do. A guard shoves the inner door closed halfway, not enough to keep the damp out, but enough to make a show of authority. His wool cloak is fur-lined at the collar, though the fur has seen better winters and possibly better owners. He stamps his feet and tells the toll collector that a man could vanish 10 paces from the gate tonight and be found in spring, if the crows left enough of him to recognize. This is said with the calmness of a man who has spent too many evenings making conversation beside a door. You keep your silence and let the warmth climb slowly into your palms. Above, someone walks across the timber floor of the watchroom. Dust sifts down in little grey threads. A candle burns in a wall niche. Beeswax if the town is feeling prosperous. Tallow if no one important is looking. Tonight it smells faintly sweet, so perhaps some merchant has paid his toll generously, or perhaps the guard has stolen half an inch from the chapel supply. No one can quite agree whether beeswax candles please the saints more than tallow, but everyone agrees they smell better, which in a medieval gatehouse is almost a miracle. A small group has been kept back by the toll collector for questioning. The wool merchant's pack horses stand just inside the arch, steaming and shifting, their loads wrapped in oiled cloth. The merchant insists he is paid at the last bridge and should not pay again. The toll collector replies that bridges and gates are different beasts, which is exactly the sort of wisdom officials develop when holding someone else's purse. The woman with smoked fish sits on an upturned crate with her basket between her feet. She has pulled a blue wool hood low around her cheeks. The pilgrim leans on his staff beneath a painted board showing the town's market rules, most of which seem designed to remind honest people how expensive honesty can become. Rain begins again, very lightly, tapping on the outer stones though you cannot see it through the mist. The sound makes the gatehouse feel smaller. Someone mentions that fog lying low after rain is a bad sign. Another says it means fever will walk. A carter with a red nose and a patch sleeve swears that when mist rises from marsh water, it carries rotten air that slips into the lungs during sleep. The guard says his grandmother tied dried rue above the bed whenever the weather turned white. The pilgrim says rue is good, but a blessed candle is better. The toll collector says blessed candles cost more than rue. This, too, seems to be accepted as theology. You listen as the talk drifts from sickness to spirits, as it often does when damp enters the room and darkness presses at the shutters. Some swear that fog confuses the dead, especially those buried without proper rites, and that such souls wander toward lanterns because they mistake them for chapel lights. Others say wandering souls have better things to do than lurk near turnip carts, which is a comforting thought, though not a popular one. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the white shapes seen beyond town walls are ghosts, thieves in pale cloaks, or ordinary bushes made ambitious by poor visibility. The dog has found its way beside you and sits with a sigh, as though it too has paid a toll and is disappointed with the service. Its coat is muddy, its ribs show, and one paw is lifted from the cold floor. The woman with the basket clicks her tongue at it and tosses a fish skin. The dog catches it badly, drops it, steps on it, then eats it with great satisfaction. Medieval table manners, you notice, are not reserved for people. A clerk comes down from the watchroom carrying a narrow board covered in notches. He is young, ink-stained at the cuffs, and sleepy in the eyes. He confers with the toll collector about the number of carts still expected before curfew. They speak of a broken wheel on the south road, of a missing flock beyond the mill, of a peddler who should have arrived by noon but has not. Such absences grow larger in fog. A missing man in clear weather is merely late. A missing man in fog becomes a story before he has even had time to be annoyed. You shift your weight and feel water squeeze from the hem of your cloak. The brazier pops. A red spark leaps upward and dies before it touches the stones. Near the gate, a guard takes down a horn lantern and checks the thin, scraped horn panels for cracks. Glass is costly, horn is practical, and neither defeats a proper mist. He mutters that the watch will need twice the oil tonight, because fog eats light faster than hungry monks eat cheese. No one laughs loudly, but several mouths move in agreement. It is not a grand joke, yet it warms the place almost as well as the coals. The pilgrim begins unpinning badges from his cloak to show the woman beside him. St. Thomas, St. James, a little scallop shell, and one small lead token so worn that the holy figure upon it could be almost anyone. He says each has guarded him on the roads. The carter asks why. In that case, he's still wet, hungry, and stuck in a gatehouse. The pilgrim answers that protection is not the same as comfort. This seems unfairly wise for a man whose shoes are tied with mismatched cord. Beyond the half-closed inner door, the town street glimmers with small lights. You see a narrow lane leading downward, a signboard swinging above what may be an alehouse, and a line of houses where smoke seeps through roof thatch. Somewhere within, a cook stirs pottage thick with peas and barley. Somewhere, rushes are being swept into heaps before fresh ones are laid. Somewhere, a child is being told not to breathe through the mouth in fog, because old women say the damp will climb straight down to the heart. Whether anyone believes this fully does not matter. The child will close his mouth, because the night is strange and mothers are persuasive. A new knock comes at the outer wicket. Everyone hears it, even the horses quiet. The sound is small, just 3 taps against oak, but the fog makes small sounds feel deliberate. The guard lifts his lantern. The toll collector places one hand over his coins, a tender gesture rarely shown to family. The dog rises without barking, ears pricked toward the door. For a moment, no one speaks. Outside waits only the mist, pale and patient, and perhaps one more traveller late to shelter. The guard opens the wicket a hand's breadth. A face appears, wet with fog, hood drawn low. It is only a monk from the nearby Abbey Grange, or so his dark robe and a rope belt claim. He carries a wrapped bundle under one arm and asks to enter before the night watch seals the road entirely. His voice is mild, but his eyes move quickly over the room, the merchant's packs, the pilgrim's badges, the toll collector's keys, your own damp cloak, and the dog at your side. You notice the dog does not wag its tail. No one can quite agree later whether this monk is suspicious from the start, or whether the fog merely lends suspicion to every ordinary thing. For now, the guard admits him, the wicket closes, and cold air spills around your boots before fading into the brazier's warmth. The monk bows his head and takes his place near the wall, not too close to the fire, not too far from the door. His bundle gives off a faint smell of wax, old linen, and something herbal. The bell rings again deeper in town, slower now, calling the last hour before night rule. The toll collector finishes his marks. The merchant grumbles, The woman lifts her basket. One by one, travellers are released from the waiting place into the candlelit streets. You step after them, the dog following close enough that its shoulder brushes your leg, while behind you the gatehouse returns to murmurs, sparks, damp stone, and the soft argument of those still deciding whether fog is weather, warning or a door left open between worlds. You pass from the gatehouse into the town's narrow street, and the fog loosens around you like a cloak being reluctantly unfastened. It does not vanish. It simply learns the shape of the town. It settles in doorways, gathers under hanging signs, whitens the gutters, and turns every lantern into a small, uncertain moon. The street slopes downward toward the market square, and you follow it slowly, guided by the smell of hearth smoke, boiled onions, damp timber, and the faint sourness that rises from any medieval lane after sunset, especially one that has enjoyed the company of horses, pigs, people, and ambitious drainage. The dog keeps beside you, still uninvited and therefore completely committed. Its paws make soft sounds in the mud and straw. Behind you, the monk from the gatehouse walks at a distance, his dark robe moving through the mist like a strip of night that has become lost. You do not know whether he follows you or merely follows the same street, and in a town this cramped, such distinctions are a luxury. His bundle remains tucked beneath his arm. Wax, old linen, herbs that faint scent returns whenever the fog folds the air back toward you. You find lodging in a hall near the market, not grand enough to call itself an inn without blushing, yet busy enough to have benches, a hearth, and a woman with the ladle who can turn barley, peas, cabbage, and salted scraps into pottage that taste like survival. Rushes cover the floor, mixed with rosemary and sweet flag to soften the smell beneath them. Some swear that strewing herbs on rushes keeps sickness away as well as stink, though no one can quite agree whether the herbs cleanse the air or simply make misery more fragrant. Either way, your boots are grateful. You sleep poorly beneath a wool blanket that scratches like an offended sheep. Through the shutters you hear bells, first late, then later, then somewhere in the dark a watchman calling the hour with a voice blurred by fog. The dog curls near the door after circling 3 times, as if measuring the room for threats or fleas. You wake once to the sound of someone coughing below the window. You wake again to the creak of cart wheels. By the time pale morning seeps into the hall, the fog has thickened, and the town beyond the doorway looks less like a place of walls and roofs than a grey bowl filled with murmuring. The market is already coming alive. You step into the square with your cloak drawn close and your hands tucked into the sleeves for warmth. Stalls emerge one by one as you approach them, a fishmonger beneath a patched awning, a baker setting coarse loaves on a board, a woman selling onions braided in ropes, a cooper tapping the rim of a small barrel, a knife grinder working his wheel with one foot while pretending not to watch everyone's purse. The fog softens all edges. It turns bright cloth dull, hides the far side of the square, and makes voices seem to come from places where no mouth can be seen. Market day is a kind of theatre, though the actors mostly smell of wool, smoke, and debt. Merchants cry their wares without crying too loudly, because shouting into fog feels foolish and brings little dignity. A man with a basket of eggs swears each one is fresh enough to shame a nobleman's breakfast. A woman selling eels insists they were alive at dawn, which is meant as praise, though the eels themselves appear to have retired from public life. Nearby, 2 boys chase a pig that has slipped its cord and now trots through the square with the solemn purpose of a minor lord inspecting property. You keep one hand near your purse. Fog is a friend to nimble fingers. A thief need not run far when the air itself helps him disappear. Near the bread stall, A pilgrim complains that his badge has been cut from his hat. It was only a cheap pewter token, yet he grieves it loudly, because a pilgrim badge is proof of miles walked, prayers offered, and discomfort properly endured. The baker says badges do not vanish by themselves. The pilgrim says neither do loaves, and yet the baker's thumb rests suspiciously on the scale. This produces a silence of mutual understanding. False measures are another hidden threat in the mist. A cloth merchant smooths his wool across the counter and measures it by the ell, his forearm moving with saintly confidence. The buyer squints, unable to see clearly where the cloth ends and the fog begins. A town officer, wearing a badge of authority and a face of practiced boredom, checks the measuring rod hanging from a nail. In many towns, the official ell is kept near the market cross, so every bargain may pretend to be honest beneath heaven's gaze. Some swear that cheating at the market invites punishment not only from the court, but from the saint whose image watches the square. Others say saints are busy and market officers are cheaper. You drift toward the market cross, its stone steps slick with damp. At its base, a woman sells little charms twisted thread, tiny cloth packets of dried herbs, and pins bent into shapes meant to catch ill luck before it catches the wearer. She tells a young mother that fog confuses children's spirits, and that a sprig of fennel tucked into the sleeve will help a little one remember the way home. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she believes this, whether the mother believes it, or whether both know that fear often pays in small coins. The monk appears near the fish stall. You see him only for a moment between hanging strips of smoked herring and the steam rising from a pot of hot ale. His hood is lowered now, revealing a narrow face and a tonsure darkened by mist. He speaks to no one. His bundle is gone from under his arm. In its place he carries a small beeswax candle, half burned, cupped carefully in one hand, though it is not lit. The dog sees him too. Its ears lift, and a low sound begins in its throat. Not quite a growl, more a private opinion. Before you can follow, the escaped pig rushes between two stools, dragging a cord, scattering onions, and overturning a basket of wooden spoons. The square erupts in soft chaos, sellers scolding, children laughing, a goose objecting with the moral force of a bishop. You step aside as the pig passes, noble in panic, and nearly collide with a man whose hand is much too near your purse. He smiles as though you are old friends separated by fog and poor decisions. You smile back without warmth. And he melts into the grey before anyone can ask what friendship costs. The morning bell rings from the parish church, and its sound pushes through the market like a slow wave. For a breath, people pause a baker with flour on his sleeve, a fishwife with red hands, a carter rubbing his jaw, the charm seller counting coins, the pilgrim touching the empty place on his hat. Then life resumes, because bells may call souls upward, but cabbage still needs selling. You buy a heel of coarse bread and a small cup of watered ale from a stall near the cross. The bread is dense, dark, and honest in the way stones are honest. You dip it into the ale to soften it and share a corner with the dog, who accepts as though it has supervised the entire purchase. Fog beads along its whiskers, across the square, beyond the shapes of stalls and shoulders. The road leading east disappears between houses. Somewhere along that way lies the pilgrim road, the roadside shrine, and the open fields beyond the town walls. You look once more for the monk and find only a smear of dark cloth vanishing behind a row of hanging hides. Near the fish stall, on the wet stones, lies a thread of red wool like the rowan charm at the toll collector's neck. Perhaps it means nothing. Medieval streets are full of scraps, knots, signs, and things dropped by people too cold to notice. Yet the dog sniffs it, sneezes, and looks toward the eastern lane. So you finish your bread, tuck your purse deeper under your cloak, and move with the market crowd toward the road out, while the fog lifts only enough to show that it has been hiding more fog behind it all along. You leave the market by the eastern lane while the square behind you continues its damp, muffled bargaining, and the sounds fade as though someone lays folded wool over the town. The houses lean close at first, their shutters dark with wet, their thresholds brushed with straw, their gutters carrying away a slow mixture of rainwater, ash, vegetable peelings, and whatever else a town prefers not to discuss in polite company. Then the lane narrows, bends beneath a low arch, and brings you to the smaller gate where pilgrims, tinkers, shepherds, and those who cannot afford the main road pass into the country. The guard here is older than the ones at the western gate. His beard is grey, his nose red from cold, and his patience stored somewhere unreachable. He lifts his lantern to study you, the dog, and the empty road beyond, as if all three are equally questionable. He asks whether you mean to take the pilgrim way by the river bank or the higher road past the ploughed strips. You tell him the pilgrim road, and he grunts. In fog, he says, the low way swallows feet, the high way swallows pride. This is not advice so much as a complete medieval weather report. Beyond the gate, the road drops between hedges silvered with mist. The town wall fades behind you almost at once. Its towers become pale shapes, then shadows, then nothing but the memory of stone. You hear the gate close after another traveller, and the sound seems far too final for such a small door. Ahead, the pilgrim path unwinds through damp grass, bare willows, and low fields where the morning cannot decide whether to arrive properly. The fog has grown whiter in daylight. Less frightening, perhaps, but more skillful. It hides distance now. It makes the world intimate and treacherous at the same time, like a whispered secret from someone you do not entirely trust. The dog trots a few paces ahead, nose low, accepting the role of guide despite showing no qualifications beyond confidence and hunger. Its folded ear bobs with each step. Your boots slide on the wet path. Mud clings to the soles until every stride becomes a small negotiation with the earth. A line of pilgrims moves somewhere ahead of you, unseen except for the clink of a staff ring and a cough. One of them sings under his breath, not well, but with the stubbornness of a man who has paid for spiritual discomfort and intends to receive full value. After a little while, the path brings you to a roadside shrine. It stands where two tracks meet beside a leafless hawthorn tree, a small stone niche roofed with slate, no taller than a kneeling man. Inside rests a painted figure of a saint whose face has been softened by weather until the expression is either mercy or damp confusion. A strip of faded blue cloth is tied to the iron grill. Several pins, bent horseshoe nails, and little twists of thread have been pushed into cracks in the stone. At the base lie offerings: a crust of bread, a cracked bead, a candle stub, 2 feathers, and a pilgrim badge so worn that its holy destination has become an act of imagination. You stop because everyone stops at places like this, even those who claim not to believe. A shrine by the road is less like a grand church and more like a neighbour's hand on your sleeve. It says, "Here is where fear has paused before. Here is where others have asked to arrive safely. Here is where the path admits it cannot protect you by itself." You touch the cold stone with 2 fingers. It is wet, gritty, and steady beneath your hand. An old woman kneels before the niche, tying a red thread around a thorn of the hawthorn. Her cloak is patched at the elbows, and a basket of eggs hangs from one arm, wrapped in straw against breakage. She murmurs a prayer so softly that the fog seems to lean in to hear it. When she rises, she notices the dog and smiles with 3 teeth and absolute certainty. "That one has chosen you," she says. You glance down at the dog, who is licking mud from one paw and looking chosen by nothing except appetite. The old woman tells you that a dog who follows through fog may be a warning, or a blessing, or merely a dog with poor boundaries. No one can quite agree whether animals see what people cannot, though every village has at least one story of a horse refusing a bridge before it breaks, a goose shrieking before strangers arrive, or a cat staring at an empty corner until the room becomes too cold. She gives the dog a look of respect. The dog sneezes into the roadside grass. Mystery, you notice. Wears many humble disguises. A younger pilgrim steps up beside you, perhaps the same one whose badge was stolen in the market, though fog and travel have a way of making all tired pilgrims resemble cousins. His hat now bears only the stitch marks where the token had been cut away. He leaves a small coin beneath the shrine and touches a scallop shell tied at his belt. He says the shrine belongs to St. Guthlac or St. Botolph, or perhaps a local holy man who once slept in a marsh and argued successfully with devils. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but they agree the saint is useful for roads, swamps, boundaries, and awkward weather. A man with a mule arrives from the lower track and warns that the river path is nearly blind. He has seen lanterns ahead where there should be no houses, and heard bells where there is no church. Some swear that marsh lights are souls unable to find graves. Others say they are vapours from rotten water, which seems less poetic but no more comforting when a pale flame hovers over a ditch at midnight. The muleman spits carefully to one side, then makes the sign of the cross so quickly it almost becomes part of the spit. Medieval caution often works in layers. Near the shrine, a narrow board has been nailed to a post, listing tolls for the bridge farther east. Pack horse, 1 penny. Cart, 2. Sheep, by number and patience. Pilgrim, free unless selling goods, which no pilgrim ever admits to doing until caught. You imagine the toll-keeper squinting through fog at a flock of sheep and trying to count moving wool in weather designed by accountants' enemies. Somewhere, perhaps, saints laugh very quietly. You step beneath the hawthorn. Its branches are studded with rags, threads, and small offerings tied there by travellers' strips of linen from bandaged wrists, bits of coloured wool, a tiny pouch that may hold salt, a broken comb, a charm of braided straw, salt against bad luck, iron against spirits, bread for hunger, a thorn tree for prayers that need somewhere to cling. The customs overlap like old blankets, Christian words wrapped around older habits no one has quite thrown away. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the folk who leave these tokens ask help from heaven, from the tree, from memory, or from all 3 at once just to be safe. The old woman presses something into your palm before she goes. It is a small twist of fennel and rue bound with red thread, damp but fragrant when you lift it near your face. She says to keep it tucked in your sleeve until the fog thins. It will help the lungs, confuse ill-wishing, and remind you not to step where the ground sounds hollow. That is a great deal of responsibility for a tired herb bundle, but you thank her. In this world, refusing protection is rude, and possibly foolish. The suspicious monk passes while you still stand at the shrine. He comes from the town road without hurry, his robe hemmed dark with mud. In one hand he carries a staff, in the other, partly hidden by his sleeve, you glimpse the half-burned beeswax candle from the market. He bows to the shrine, but not quite deeply enough for a monk, or perhaps exactly deeply enough for a cold man with sore knees. The dog watches him, tail low. The old woman has already moved away into the fog, yet you wish she had stayed to judge him. Old women at shrines are often more reliable than town officers. The monk notices the red-threaded herbs in your hand and gives the faintest smile. "Roads teach caution," he says. Then he steps onto the higher path and vanishes between the hedges. You remain a moment longer, listening. The monastery bell sounds faintly from somewhere beyond the fields, or perhaps from the fog itself. The note is low and patient. It folds over the shrine, the thorn tree, the damp offerings, the pilgrim's missing badge, the dog's lifted ears, and the road that waits ahead in two directions. You tuck the herbs into your sleeve, feel their cool stems against your wrist, and choose the higher path after all. The ground rises gently under your boots. Behind you, the roadside shrine becomes pale, then smaller, then gone. The dog follows, though this time it stays closer than before. The fog gathers across the fields ahead, hiding furrows, sheep, ditches, and whatever else the open country has kept for you. The higher path lifts you away from the shrine and into open country, though open is a generous word for land that refuses to show itself. The fields spread on either side beneath a white, quiet covering of fog, so that hedges appear only when you nearly touch them. Trees rise like thoughts half remembered, and the furrows under your boots seem to begin and end without warning. Frost has gathered in the grass, thin as salt, and every step breaks it with a soft whisper. The red-threaded herbs rest in your sleeve, cool against your wrist, filling the damp air near your face with fennel, rue, and the faint medicinal bravery of old women who have seen too many winters to be impressed by weather. You walk slowly. There is no other honest way to walk in such a morning. The road is not paved here, only packed earth and chalky stone, worn by carts, hooves, bare feet, and the dragging patience of generations. On clear days, the high path would show the town behind you, the river below, the abbey beyond the meadows, and perhaps the dark belt of forest farther east. Today it shows a ditch when your boot nearly slides into it, a gate when your hand bumps the latch, and a blackbird when it bursts from a hedge with the dramatic timing of a tax collector. A bell sounds behind you, softened by distance. Then another answers from somewhere ahead. Monastery bells mark time more faithfully than the sun on mornings like this, when the sky is only a brighter kind of grey. You imagine monks moving through cloisters by habit alone, their sandals scraping stone, their candles shielded in narrow hands, their stomachs already thinking piously of bread. Even holiness, you suspect, appreciates breakfast. Soon you hear voices in the field to your left. They come low and close, though the speakers remain hidden. A man calls for someone named Wat. A woman answers that Wat is by the lower hedge. A child says he is not. A sheep bleats in a tone that suggests Wat, whoever he is, has failed at several duties. You pause beside a stile, and shapes gather out of the fog, peasants bent over the frosted field, their woolen hoods pulled low, their hands red with cold. They are not ploughing today, for the ground is too stiff, but they are walking the strips, checking the winter wheat, gathering loose hurdles, and hunting for 3 missing sheep that slipped through a broken fence before dawn. One of the men carries a crook, another has a wooden clapper to startle animals from the mist. The woman holds a bundle of straw rope used to bind repairs around fence posts. Their clothing is patched in the practical language of poor households, 1 brown sleeve, 1 grey sleeve, a green hood faded almost to no colour at all. Around the woman's neck hangs a small linen pouch. She tells you it holds salt, a scrap from a blessed palm, and a tooth from an old sheepdog. Because some swear such things keep beasts from wandering into white weather. No one can quite agree whether the tooth guides the sheep, frightens the fog, or merely makes the wearer feel less helpless. In a field like this, feeling less helpless is not a small thing. You ask after the road to the abbey, and the man with the crook points into blankness with complete confidence, which is both helpful and alarming. He says to keep the hedge on your right until the ash tree, then follow the ridge until the stones underfoot turn sharp. Then listen for the mill stream. If you hear geese, you have gone too far. If you hear nothing at all, you should stop, because the old quarry lies somewhere below the east slope and has swallowed better men than you. This is delivered without drama, as one might mention that the bread is stale. The dog sniffs at the stile, then slips under it and trots toward the voices. It finds the lost sheep before anyone else does, or at least finds one of them, a damp, woolly shape standing in a hollow with its head through a gap in the hedge, chewing with the calm stupidity of an animal that has caused a committee. The child shouts. The woman laughs softly. The sheep is freed after some tugging, scolding, and one deeply personal insult involving its mother's judgment. Medieval livestock management, you learn, is part agriculture, part wrestling, and part legal argument. The peasants invite you to warm your hands at their little field fire, built in the lee of a low stone wall where the fog smells of smoke and frozen earth. A blackened pot hangs over the coals, though it holds more hope than food, thin pottage of oats, leek, and perhaps a memory of bacon. They share a wooden cup of small ale, weak but safer than ditch water, and a heel of coarse bread hard enough to defend a castle gate. You take a little, careful not to seem greedy. Out here, hospitality is real, but so is scarcity, and everyone sees how much bread remains. As you sit, the woman tells of a boy from the next village who vanished in fog 3 winters past. Some swear he followed bells that were not bells, and came home at noon with his hair rimmed white, though he had been gone only an hour. Others say he fell asleep in a hayrick and invented the rest to avoid a beating. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, which is how most village mysteries preserve their dignity. The child listening beside her clearly prefers the bell version. So do you. Though the hayrick version seems more common among boys. The hidden threats of the fog are plain here, quieter than blades but no kinder for that. A ditch can break a leg, a lost sheep can cost winter meat. A child sent to fetch kindling can wander past the bounds and lose the sound of home. A cart can miss the road and sink axle deep in thawing clay. Frost can hide under mud. A stream can sound like wind until your boot finds water. The peasants know all of this not as story, but as the daily grammar of survival. They live by hedges, bells, hoofprints, smoke direction, crow calls, and the remembered feel of land beneath their feet. When you rise to continue, the man with the crook presses a hazel stick into your hand. It is no staff for a knight, only a plain-cut branch, smooth from use and tipped with mud. He says to test the ground before stepping where the grass turns dark. His grandmother believed hazel could reveal hidden water and false paths. He himself believes it keeps travellers from falling into holes, which is less magical, but much easier to prove. You thank him. And he shrugs in the manner of people who give useful things because they know roads are long. The dog returns to you with bits of frost in its whiskers and a proud expression, as though it has restored the entire agricultural order. You leave the little fire, the peasants, the sheep, and the muffled field voices behind. The fog closes gently after you, swallowing the wall, then the stile, then the smoke. Ahead, the hedge runs beside the path for a while, just as promised. You keep it on your right. You tap the hazel stick before each uncertain step, somewhere beyond the white fields. A darker line begins to gather, not quite visible yet, but present in the air, the forest road waiting under bare branches, where bells fade strangely and the path may not be as loyal as it seems. The hedge keeps you company for a while, as promised, but even hedges grow uncertain in fog. It runs along your right shoulder, black thorn and pale grass woven together, then dips, breaks, and returns in places where gaps have been patched with dead branches. Your hazel stick taps the ground before each step. Sometimes it finds firm road. Sometimes it sinks softly into mud. Once it knocks against a buried stone with a hollow sound that makes you pause and decide that caution, though not glamorous, has many practical charms. The fields grow quieter behind you. The voices of the peasants fade first, then the clapper, then the occasional irritated sheep. For a time, you hear only your own boots, the dog's paws, the faint drip of moisture from hedges, and the distant bell that seems to move whenever you turn your head. No one can quite agree whether fog carries sound farther or simply makes the mind hungry for it. Either way, the bell comes and goes, low and patient, like a memory of shelter. The darker line ahead slowly becomes trees. They appear not all at once, but by degrees: a branch, a trunk, the fork of an ash, the hooked fingers of oak limbs reaching over the road. The path narrows where the forest begins. Old leaves lie black and slick beneath the frost. Cart ruts cut deep through the mud, filled with cloudy water. At the edge of the wood stands a weathered post with 3 notches carved into it, and beneath the notches someone has tied a strip of faded cloth. Perhaps it marks the boundary of a manor wood. Perhaps it warns of a bad stretch of road. Perhaps someone once tied it there for luck and everyone since has respected the mystery, because removing a mysterious cloth is exactly the sort of thing that ends badly in stories. You duck beneath the first low branch and enter the forest track. The air changes at once. In the fields, the fog spread wide and pale. Here it hangs between trunks, thicker in hollows, thin around branches, making the wood seem full of curtains. The smell deepens to wet bark, leaf mould, cold earth, moss, distant smoke, and the faint animal musk that tells you the forest belongs to many creatures who have not signed any agreement about sharing. Your cloak brushes against bramble. Drops of water fall from twigs onto your hood. The dog stays close now, no longer trotting ahead with heroic foolishness. There is a reason travellers dislike woods in fog. Roads through forests are rarely straight, and those who made them were less concerned with beauty than with avoiding bogs, steep slopes, disputed land, and trees too stubborn to cut. The track bends around roots, dips into dark places, and rises over ground where stones jut like old teeth. A clear morning might make it merely unpleasant. A foggy one makes it feel as though the path is quietly changing its mind. After some distance, you come upon a cart standing half across the road. Its rear wheel is sunk into a rut, and one shaft leans awkwardly where a horse should be. No horse is visible. The cart is loaded with bundles of firewood under a net of rope. A cracked lantern hangs from the side. Nearby, a man kneels in the mud, both hands on the wheel, speaking to it in the low, bitter tone usually reserved for sinners, weather, and relatives by marriage. He looks up when he hears you. His face is ruddy from cold, his cap pushed back, his beard wet with fog. He is a woodcutter, he says. or at least he was before becoming a man trapped in a hole with firewood. His horse has been led ahead by his son to fetch help, unless the boy has missed the turning, in which case help is now wandering somewhere east of usefulness. Some swear children can find paths better than grown men because they are closer to the ground. The woodcutter says this is nonsense invented by children. You set your shoulder against the cart when he asks. The mud sucks at the wheel. The dog supervises from a dry patch of leaves, showing the stern concern of someone unwilling to contribute physically. Together you rock the cart once, twice, then stop before it can slide deeper. The woodcutter curses softly, remembers your presence, and turns the curse into a prayer with impressive speed. Medieval manners often travel by emergency route. While you rest, he points deeper into the trees where another track splits away, barely visible. He tells you not to take it, whatever shape you think you see there. It leads toward the charcoal burners' huts, and then to old ground where men once dug for iron. In fog, the pits fill with white air and look like shallow hollows until they are not. A mule went in last winter. A man went in the winter before that. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the man slipped, was drunk, or followed a light that should not have been there. The ending, unfortunately, did not require agreement. The warning settles into the damp folds of the wood. You peer toward the wrong track and see only pale space between trunks. Then, for one brief moment, a shape moves there. It might be a man. It might be a young tree leaning under mist. It might be the monk's dark robe passing where no monk should be. The dog gives a low, private growl. When you look again, the shape is gone. The woodcutter sees your face and nods as though the forest has made its usual introduction. He says fog in the woods is full of almost things. Almost a deer. Almost a thief. Almost your own brother, if your brother happens to be shaped like a stump. Some swear that robbers wear grey cloaks and stand still beside roads until travellers pass close enough to touch. Others say wolves do the same with less planning and better teeth. The woodcutter prefers robbers. Because at least one may bargain with a robber, if one has money, charm, or poor judgment. You help him cut a branch to brace the wheel. He carries a small hand axe with an iron head and a haft dark from use, and he taps the blade twice against the cart before cutting. His wife, he says, insists iron wakes luck when struck against wood. He himself says the habit keeps him from misplacing the axe. Both explanations may be true, and neither is worth arguing with in a forest that keeps hiding the sun. At last, after much pushing, bracing, sucking mud, and one moment when the cart appears determined to sit there until Easter, the wheel lifts free with a wet pop. The woodcutter exhales like a bellows. You nearly lose a boot. The dog barks once, late, as if claiming credit. The woodcutter gives you a strip of smoked cheese wrapped in cloth, hard as a small saint's relic and twice as fragrant. You tuck it away gratefully. On a medieval road. Payment often arrives in forms that challenge both hunger and the nose. You continue along the proper track, keeping the deeper ruts beneath you and the forbidden side path well to your left. The fog thickens under the trees, branches arch overhead, and drops fall in slow, irregular taps, like fingers on a chapel door. The monastery bell, once so steady, fades until you're not sure whether you hear it at all. In its place comes the creak of branches, the hush of your cloak, the soft panting of the dog, and somewhere far off, perhaps, a footstep that stops whenever you stop. You do not hurry. Hurrying is for clear roads and people who trust them. You move as the forest allows, touching the hazel stick to mud, stone, root, and leaf. The red-threaded herbs in your sleeve have warmed against your skin. Their scent rises faintly whenever you lift your arm. Rue and fennel against wet bark and cold earth. Ahead, the trees pale slightly, and you hope it is open land, or abbey walls, or at least some place with a roof, a fire, and a bowl of pottage that has forgiven the world. Behind you, the forest closes around the track, hiding the cart, the woodcutter, the wrong path, and the shape that may have been nothing at all. The trees begin to thin by such small degrees that you mistrust the change at first. One moment the branches still lace overhead, dripping cold water onto your hood, and the next the fog ahead glows with a paler colour, the sort of grey that suggests open ground rather than more trunks. You step carefully from the forest track, hazel stick testing the mud, and find yourself at the edge of a low meadow where the grass lies silvered with frost, and the mist drifts in long, quiet folds. Across the meadow, barely visible, stands the abbey. It does not appear like a castle, proud and sharp against the sky, but like something older and more patient, rising slowly from the fog as though built from prayer, damp stone, and early mornings. First you see the dark line of a roof, then a bell tower, then the high wall enclosing cloister, church, storehouse, garden, guest house, and all the small necessary places by which holiness keeps itself fed. A cross on the tower emerges last, thin and black against the whitening air. The bell rings once while you watch, and the sound moves through the meadow with a soft authority that makes even the dog pause. You cross the meadow on a raised path made from packed earth and scattered stone. To either side, the ground dips into wet hollows where rushes grow and ice is formed in shallow puddles. The abbey owns this land, or claims it, or has been given it by someone who needed prayers after a life of enthusiastic wrongdoing. No one can quite agree whether rich men endow monasteries from devotion, guilt, fear, or good estate planning. The monks, wisely, accept land in all four cases. At the outer gate, a lay brother lets you in after a long look at your cloak, your boots, the dog, and the mud that seems determined to travel with you. He carries a ring of iron keys at his belt and a lantern shielded by horn panels. His face is broad, sleepy, and kind in the cautious way of men who open doors to strangers for a living. He asks where you have come from. You mention the town, the shrine, the forest road, and the broken cart. At the word fog, he nods as if fog is not weather but a troublesome neighbour who visits too often. The guest house stands apart from the cloister, near the bakehouse and stable yard, so travellers may be warmed and fed without wandering into the monk's quieter business. Inside, the floor is strewn with fresh rushes over stone, and the scent of them rises green and sharp beneath the stronger smells of smoke, wool, and boiled peas. A small fire burns in the hearth. Above it hangs a pot of pottage thickened with barley. On a table nearby lie trenchers of stale bread, a wooden bowl of salt, and a jug of small ale. It is not a feast, unless compared to standing outside in a ditch, in which case it is practically royal. You sit on a bench near the fire, and the dog collapses beneath it with the satisfaction of a creature who has found religion convenient. A servant brings you a bowl. The pottage is plain, warm, and honest, with a few shreds of leek and something that may once have known a fish. You eat slowly, letting heat spread through your chest. Your cloak steams faintly. Your hands, red and stiff from the road, begin to loosen. Through the open door of the guest house, you can see part of the cloister walk. Monks move there in pairs and singles, dark habits passing behind arches, their steps quiet on wet stone. The bell has called them from 1 hour to another, from prayer to work, from work to prayer, as it has done every day through frost, harvest, famine, feast, and war. A monastery's time is not like road time. On the road, you measure hours by hunger, mud, fear, and how far your feet still agree to carry you. Here, time hangs from the bell rope and descends in measured notes. A young scribe crosses the yard carrying a board covered with parchment scraps. His fingers are stained black with ink, and his shoulders are hunched against the damp. He pauses under an arch to protect his work when a gust pushes fog into the cloister. Parchment is skin, after all, and like all skin it dislikes too much wet. Some swear that manuscripts copied during heavy fog are more prone to errors, because the air clouds the eyes and the mind together. Others blame the errors on sleepy scribes, poor candles, and Latin sentences long enough to make even saints sigh. The truth, as usual, may be crowded. Near the guest-house wall sits a cupboard containing relics for travellers to view on holy days, a chip said to be from a saint's staff, a scrap of linen darkened by age, and a small bone wrapped in silk. Tonight the cupboard is locked, but the lay brother notices your glance and tells you the abbey keeps them safe, especially in weather like this. Fog brings pilgrims, he says, but it also brings hands that reach where they should not. A stolen relic is worse than a stolen purse, because the purse only angers a man, while the relic may anger heaven, the abbot, and every donor who paid to see it. That is a formidable committee. You remember the suspicious monk from the gatehouse and the market, the half-burned beeswax candle cupped in his hand, the wrapped bundle smelling of wax and herbs. You ask whether all the abbey brothers are indoors. The lay brother looks toward the cloister and says, "Most are, though one was sent to the town with wax and linen for the Grange accounts." He should have returned before the fog thickened. His tone remains calm, but his eyes shift briefly to the door. Even now, it is hard to tell whether concern in a monastery is spiritual discipline or simply practice silence. The dog lifts its head under the bench. Outside, beyond the cloister arches, fog presses against the abbey windows. It fills the garden beds where cabbages stand blackened by frost. It softens the stone well in the yard until the bucket rope seems to vanish halfway down. It gathers at the base of the church wall and creeps beneath doors when servants forget to sweep straw against the thresholds. The abbey is shelter, yes, but no wall keeps out everything. Damp enters in hems and lungs. Rumour enters with travellers. Fear enters wherever a candle burns low enough to make shadows uncertain. After the meal, the lay brother leads you to a sleeping place in the guest-house hall. Wool blankets are folded on a chest. A row of pallets lies near the wall, each stuffed with straw that crackles when touched and smells faintly of field mice, harvest dust, and other people's dreams. You choose one close enough to the fire for warmth, but not so close that sparks may improve your cloak without permission. The dog circles once and drops beside you, as if the matter has been discussed and settled. Before sleep, you step outside to rinse your hands at a basin beneath the eaves. The water is cold enough to make your fingers ache. Across the yard, in a narrow window lit by candle glow, you see the young scribe again. He bends over his desk, scratching ink across parchment while the fog turns the glass pale around him. For a moment, behind his reflection, another darker shape appears at the edge of the cloister. A monk, perhaps. A shadow, perhaps. The dog gives one soft growl from the doorway. Then the abbey bell rings for the next office, slow and deep, and the shape is gone before the last note fades. You return to your pallet, tuck the red threaded herbs back into your sleeve, and listen as the monastery settles around you. Murmured prayers, footfalls, wind under the tiles, a cough behind a curtain, the half-burned candle by the hearth bending toward its own pool of wax. Outside, the fog waits against the stone. Sleep in the abbey guest-house comes in pieces, like bread broken by tired hands. You drift for a while beneath the wool blanket, hearing the fire settle, the dog sigh, and the straw inside your pallet crackle whenever you shift. Then a bell wakes you, deep in the night, not loud but certain, calling the monks from darkness into prayer. The sound moves through the walls and into your bones. It does not ask whether anyone is comfortable. Bells, like abbots and winter, are not deeply interested in excuses. You open your eyes to a dim red glow on the hearth. The room is almost dark. Other travellers sleep along the wall, bundled in cloaks and blankets, their forms made shapeless by shadow. Someone snores softly with the rhythm of a small saw working through damp wood. The dog lies near your feet, one ear lifted. The half-burned candle by the hearth has guttered low, its beeswax melted into a pale, uneven pool. It smells faintly sweet beneath the thicker scents of smoke, straw, wet wool, and bodies too tired to be elegant. A cough comes from the far corner. At first it is only part of the night, no stranger than the creak of beams or the hiss of a coal. Then it comes again, longer, rougher, and the lay brother who opened the gate appears from behind the hanging curtain near the passage. He carries a lantern and bends over one of the travellers, a carter by the look of his boots, who sits hunched on his pallet with a cloth pressed to his mouth. The lantern light shows sweat on the man's brow, though the room is cold. His wife, wrapped in a patched cloak, whispers that the fog got into his chest on the river road. No one can quite agree whether fog enters the body like smoke, whether it carries fever from marshes, or whether cold wet air merely gives old sickness a better chair by the fire. Yet everyone in the room understands the fear. A cough in a medieval hall is never only a cough. It is a question asked in the dark: will this pass by morning, or will it sit down among you and stay? The lay brother sends a boy for the infirmera, and soon another monk arrives, older, narrow-shouldered, and wide awake in the resigned way of those called from sleep too often. His belt carries a small knife, a pouch of dried herbs, and a horn spoon. His sleeves are rolled back, revealing wrists as thin as carved sticks. He kneels beside the carter and listens to his breathing, one hand hovering near the man's back, the other lifting the lantern close enough to warm his own fingers. You sit up without meaning to. The dog presses against your shin. Around you, other sleepers pretend not to wake, which is one of the great skills of shared medieval lodging. Everyone hears everything. Everyone grants everyone else the mercy of pretending otherwise. The infirmera asks where the man has travelled, what he has eaten, whether he has slept under open rain, and whether he has passed near marsh water. He smells the cloth, studies the man's tongue, and touches his forehead with the back of 2 fingers. Then he asks for hot water, honey if any can be spared, and a little hyssop, horehound, and sage from the infirmary chest. The lay brother nods. Honey, you suspect, will be the subject of a small private tragedy in the kitchen. For sweet things do not leave storage willingly. The infirmary lies across the yard, and because sleep has retreated beyond reach, you are allowed to help carry the lantern while the lay brother fetches what is needed. The dog follows, of course. It has become clear that no door, office, or sacred rule has made a serious impression on it. You step into the cloister air and feel the fog touch your face at once, cold and soft, as though the night has lifted a damp hand to see if you're still there. The infirmary is a low building near the herb garden, warmer than the yard and sharper in smell. Inside, bunches of dried plants hang from rafters: sage, rue, betony, lavender, yarrow, fennel, and others you cannot name. Shelves hold pots, jars, linen rolls, wooden boxes, and a small covered basin where leeches are kept in water. The leeches are highly respected, in a quiet, unpleasant sort of way. Some swear they draw out bad blood and balance the humours. Others, probably the leeches, keep their opinions to themselves. The old monk opens a chest and selects herbs by touch as much as sight. He explains, not to instruct exactly, but because wakeful people in dark rooms often speak to keep worry from growing too large. Hyssop for the chest, horehound for the cough, sage for warmth and cleansing, rue, carefully, because too much of a useful thing can become a foolish thing. He adds a pinch of dried violet and asks the lay brother whether the abbey still has licorice root. The lay brother says yes. Unless the cellarer has hidden it again from the novices, this appears to be a known crime. On a table nearby lies a small parchment charm written in cramped Latin, folded into a square and tied with blue thread. The lay brother catches your glance and says some travellers ask for words to wear against fever. The infirmary sniffs, though not unkindly. He says words can comfort, herbs can soothe, warmth can help, and sometimes God does as God wills. Those who tell healing tales never fully agree which part saved the patient afterward. People prefer tidy causes. Illness prefers crowded rooms. He gives you a small clay cup to carry back, filled with hot water steeping dark around crushed leaves. The scent rises bitter and green. You walk carefully across the yard, the lantern glow turning the fog amber near your hand and useless beyond your elbow. In the cloister, a monk passes with his hood drawn low, moving toward the church. For a moment you think it is the suspicious brother from the road. The dog stops. Its body goes still. But when the monk turns, the face is round, sleepy, and entirely unfamiliar. You let out a breath you didn't know you held. Back in the guest house, the carter drinks the bitter brew in slow sips. His wife holds the cup. The infirmary rubs a little warm fat mixed with herbs onto the man's chest, then wraps him in an extra blanket and orders the fire fed. He also sets a bowl of steaming water near the pallet, so the man may breathe the vapour. Some swear steam loosens the evil damp inside the lungs. Others say it mostly makes a cold room smell like boiled hedgerow. Tonight, either benefit is welcome. The monk does not bleed him. Not yet. He says the man is weak and cold, and opening a vein in such a state would be like inviting winter in through a second door. You appreciate this restraint. Medieval medicine often carries a toolbox that makes modern discomfort look rather shy. As the room settles again, the infirmary hangs a small sprig of rosemary near the pallet and murmurs a prayer. He is careful, almost tender, as he does it. The charm in his words is not loud. It is more like placing another blanket over fear. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the people in the room trust the herbs, the prayer, the heat, or the monk's calm hands most. Perhaps it does not matter. In a fog-bound night, help may arrive wearing many names. You return to your pallet, but sleep remains far off. The dog curls closer than before. The half-burned candle at the hearth leans low, and in its trembling light you notice something near the doorway, a smear of mud darker than the rest, shaped like the edge of a robe where someone has stood for a while. Beside it lies a single thread of red wool, damp and twisted. You pick it up between finger and thumb. It might be nothing, a scrap from a cloak, a piece of binding from a herb charm, a memory from the roadside shrine brought in on someone's boot. Yet the dog watches it with fixed attention, and outside, beyond the stone walls, the fog presses close to the infirmary windows, to the cloister arches, to the locked relic cupboard, to every door that men believe they have made secure. The bell rings again before dawn, softer now because you're tired enough to let the sound pass through you. The carter's breathing eases, the fire recovers its glow. The infirmera sits on a stool, head bowed, not quite sleeping, not quite waking, his hands folded inside his sleeves. You tuck the red-threaded scrap beside the herbs already hidden at your wrist. Pull the wool blanket over your shoulder and let the room blur at the edges. In the darkness, the abbey breathes with prayer, smoke and damp stone, while unseen beyond the glass, the fog keeps its patient watch. By the time the abbey bell gives its last deep note before morning, sleep has become a thin cloth over your thoughts, easily stirred by every sound. The carter in the corner breathes more steadily now. His wife has fallen asleep sitting upright, one hand still resting on the blanket at his shoulder. The infirmera remains near the hearth, chin lowered, as if he has been carved from patience and old wool. The half-burned candle has finally drowned itself in a small pool of wax, leaving only the fire to shape the room. You rise quietly before the guest house fully wakes. The dog rises with you because it seems to believe your movements require inspection. Outside, the abbey yard is wet, pale, and still. Fog lies low across the stones, slipping around the well, the bakehouse wall, the stable door, and the bare stems of the herb garden. A novice hurries past with a bucket, his sandals slapping damply, his face pinched by cold and obedience. Somewhere unseen, bread is being drawn from an oven, and that warm smell moves through the mist like a kindly rumour. The lay brother gives you a heel of coarse bread, a small wedge of the hard cheese from the guest house stores, and directions to the road beyond the abbey fields. He tells you the village alehouse lies past the mill stream and the old lime kiln, where travellers often wait out bad weather before choosing the marsh path or the manor road. His eyes rest briefly on the red thread tucked at your sleeve, then on the dog. He says nothing about either. Monasteries are full of men trained to notice things silently, which is useful for prayer and deeply inconvenient for secrets. You leave through the outer gate as the first pale light spreads behind the fog. The abbey wall fades behind you, its bells continue marking time for those within, but each step softens their hold until their sound becomes another damp thread in the air. The road slopes down beside a mill stream hidden under white vapour. You hear water before you see it, turning somewhere below the bank, steady and cold. The hazel stick tests the path, the dog tests smells, together. You follow the wheel ruts toward the low village where the alehouse sign swings in the mist. It is not yet noon when you reach it, though the fog has made time uncertain. The alehouse stands beside the road, timber-framed, low-roofed, with smoke leaking through the thatch and a painted sign too faded to identify. It may once have been a boar, a saint, or a very angry turnip. A bench sits beneath the eaves, wet and empty. Beside the door hangs a bundle of dried broom, marking that ale is sold within. No one can quite agree whether the best ale is brewed under a waxing moon, though everyone agrees that bad ale is best blamed on the moon, the malt, the water, the brewer, or the customer's ungrateful tongue. Inside, the room is smoky and close, with soot-black rafters and rushes spread over hard earth. A fire burns in a clay-lined hearth. The air smells of ale, onions, damp leather, wool, wood smoke, and the sharp sweetness of spilled drink beginning to sour. You sit near a wall where you can warm one shoulder and keep the door in sight. The dog settles beneath the bench as though it has known this alehouse for years and been disappointed by it before. A woman with rolled sleeves brings you a wooden cup of small ale and a trencher with pottage thick enough to stand a spoon in, though no spoon is offered until she remembers you are not local and may still have delicate expectations. The pottage holds peas, barley, leek, and a shred of smoked fish. It is warm, salty, and far better than any meal eaten while walking. You eat slowly. The room murmurs around you. Carters sit near the hearth, boots steaming. A pair of pilgrims lean over their cups, comparing blisters as if discussing noble lineages. A soldier with a dented cap and a cloak clasp shaped like a wolf tells a miller that fog is worse than rain, because rain is honest enough to fall downward. Fog, he says, creeps sideways, hides ditches, softens hoofbeats, and lets a man approach without carrying his own outline. The miller answers that soldiers blame fog because it cannot answer back. This wins a few quiet smiles. Soon the stories begin, as they always do in smoky rooms where travel has been difficult and ale has been paid for. One carter tells of an ambush on the North Road, where men in grey cloaks tied wool around their horse bells so they could move silently through mist. Another insists ghost lights dance over the marsh beyond the village, and that any traveller who follows them wakes knee-deep in black water with his purse gone and his dignity worse. A pilgrim says he once heard chapel bells ringing from an empty hill. The alewife says he probably heard cowbells and improved the tale for lodging. Some swear that is how half of pilgrimage literature begins. You listen, letting warmth move through your fingers around the cup. The hidden threats of fog gather in their words: thieves at bends, loose stones on bridges, fever from wet clothes, stray arrows during a hunt, unfriendly dogs, unfriendly men, and the worst danger of thinking you know the road better than the road knows itself. The soldier says fog makes even trained watchmen foolish. The miller says trained watchmen manage that in clear weather too. Medieval public debate, you notice, often survives on ale and disrespect. Then the suspicious monk enters. The room does not fall silent. Not truly, but the sound thins. He stands in the doorway with fog behind him, robe hem dark, hood lowered, face calm and narrow, no bundle now, no candle in sight. Yet the smell of wax and bitter herbs seems to come with him, or perhaps your memory supplies it. He orders hot ale with honey, a costly choice for a humble brother, and takes a place near the far wall beneath a hanging string of dried onions. The dog lifts its head under your bench, watches him, and does not blink. The monk speaks little at first, but carters are generous with suspicion when someone else pays for drink, and soon one asks whether the abbey road is safe. The monk says all roads are safe for those whom God preserves. The soldier replies that God preserves many men by giving them strong boots and a sharp eye. The monk smiles faintly. Those who tell the tale later would not agree whether the smile is patience, mockery, or only weariness from the road. A pilgrim mentions that a relic has gone missing from a chapel near the town, not a famous relic, not a king-making bone or a saint's whole hand, but a scrap of linen kept in a little wax-sealed case. It had drawn travellers during fever seasons. Some believed touching its case could guard the lungs from damp sickness. Others believed it guarded the chapel's donation box more effectively than any sermon. The monk looks into his cup when this is said. You remember the locked relic cupboard at the abbey. You remember the half-burned candle. You remember red wool at the gate, the shrine, and the guest-house door. Even now, It is hard to tell whether these pieces make a pattern, or whether fog has taught your mind to tie knots where none exist. Outside, a horse snorts. The alehouse door opens briefly, and cold mist pours in low across the floor. A young boy calls that the marsh path is flooding near the rotten planks, and anyone bound east should leave before the water rises. The room stirs, travellers groan, finish cups, tighten belts, search for purses, and remember suddenly that roads do not improve while people sit discussing them. The monk rises before anyone else. As he passes your bench, something slips from his sleeve and lands softly in the rushes, a tiny fleck of pale wax with a red thread caught in it. His hand moves quickly, but not quickly enough to stop the dog from standing. For one quiet breath, you, the dog, and the monk all look at the same little thing. Then he picks it up, bows as if nothing has happened, and steps back into the fog. You leave the alehouse with the taste of small ale still warm on your tongue, and the image of that pale wax fleck tucked sharply into your thoughts. The suspicious monk has already vanished into the fog beyond the road, and though several travellers step outside at once, tightening cloaks and adjusting packs, no one else seems troubled by his leaving. That is one of fog's quieter talents. It makes absence look ordinary. A man goes through a door, the white air closes behind him, and soon everyone agrees he was never their concern. The dog, however, is not so charitable. It sniffs the threshold, sneezes, then looks down the road with its folded ear lifted and its whole body pointing after the monk. You tell yourself that following suspicious monks through marshland before proper daylight is not a sensible habit. Then again, sensible habits have not been strongly represented on this journey. You settle your cloak around your shoulders, grip the hazel stick given by the field peasant, and follow the road toward the marsh path. The village fades quickly behind you. Its last houses stand low and damp beneath sagging thatch, with smoke leaking from roof holes and chickens sheltering beneath carts as though they are scholars of weather. Beyond the final cottage, the road divides. One track climbs toward the manor fields, the other drops toward the marsh, where pale reeds stand stiff in the fog and hidden water makes small, secret sounds. The boy from the alehouse had warned that the planks may soon flood, and so you choose the lower road before rising water can make the choice for you. The air grows colder near the marsh. It smells of wet reeds, mud, sour grass, rotting leaves, and slow water sleeping under mist. Frost clings to the reed stems in tiny white beads. Somewhere close by, a bird calls once and then seems to regret it. Your boots press into soft ground, and the hazel stick proves its worth almost immediately, sinking into mud where the path looks solid and striking wood where the first narrow plank bridge hides beneath fog. You place one foot on the planks, they bend, complain, and hold. No one can quite agree whether marshes are more dangerous by day or night. By night, at least. A traveller expects trouble. By day in fog, the world looks gentle, pale, and almost harmless, which is rude behaviour from a landscape full of black water, hidden holes, and reeds tall enough to conceal both men and unpleasant surprises. You cross slowly, feeling each board through the sole of your boot. The dog trots behind you, suddenly careful, its claws ticking softly on damp wood. Ahead, the path breaks into little islands of firmer ground connected by causeways, planks, and stretches of raised turf. The marsh opens around you but refuses to show its edges. Willow trunks lean from the mist, their branches bare and dripping. Clumps of sedge rise like sleeping animals. Here and there, old bundles of brushwood have been laid into the mud to strengthen the way. A road made not once, but constantly, by villagers who know that marshland eats repairs as patiently as monks eat lentils. A small roadside cross stands where the path bends. It is made of weathered wood, black at the base from damp, and hung with a strip of linen so grey it has almost become part of the fog. Beside it rests a broken pot filled with pebbles, each one left by a traveller who crossed safely or hoped to. Some swear that counting the stones gives the number of souls the marsh has spared. Others say counting them is bad luck. Because marshes dislike being audited, you add no pebble, having not yet earned such confidence. Then you see a light. It glows ahead and to the right, small and pale, floating just above the reeds. Not a torch, not exactly a lantern. It trembles without moving, then slips sideways as if carried by someone walking behind the curtain of fog. The dog freezes. Your hand tightens around the hazel stick. You remember the mule man at the shrine speaking of marsh lights where there should be no houses, and the alehouse stories of travellers waking knee-deep in black water after following a glow that promised shelter. For a moment, the light is beautiful. That may be its worst feature. You stand still and listen. No footsteps, no voice. Only the suck and murmur of water under reeds. The light drifts farther right, away from the planked path. Perhaps it is a lantern carried by a reed cutter. Perhaps rotten marsh gas has taken flame in some strange way. Perhaps it is the soul of a drowned man, or perhaps it is nothing more than your tired eyes and the fog playing at sainthood with a drop of distant sun. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a medieval traveller fears the supernatural because the world is mysterious, or because the natural world is already dangerous enough to deserve legends. The dog gives one low whine, not toward the light but toward the path under your feet. You lower the hazel stick and tap ahead. The wood strikes empty air. One more step would have carried you off the broken edge of the causeway, where floodwater has eaten the bank beneath a thin veil of reeds. You step back slowly, breath held. The light vanishes into the fog as if disappointed in your manners. "Good dog," you whisper. The dog accepts this tribute with grave humility, then immediately sniffs a lump of mud with more interest than heroism usually permits. You find the safer line by touch. The plank's angle left, half submerged, slick with green slime. You cross with your arms spread slightly, undignified but alive, which is a trade many medieval people would recommend. Your cloak catches on a reed, mud splashes your hem, a cold bead of water runs down inside your boot, and you decide that if saints do keep accounts of suffering, wet socks must count for something. Farther on, you pass a reed cutter's shelter, a low hut of woven willow and turf, its doorway empty, its roof beaded with frost. A bundle of cut reeds lies beside it, tied with rope. Reed is useful for thatch, bedding, mats, candles, and a dozen humble things that make poor households less miserable. Near the doorway hangs a charm of crossed rushes bound with thread. Some say such knots keep wandering spirits from entering, because spirits must pause to untangle them. This seems optimistic, but charmingly administrative. On the mud near the hut, you find a footprint, sandal-shaped, fresh enough that water still gathers in its edge. The monk has passed this way. The path rises beyond the reed beds, and the fog thins enough to reveal a dark line of willows along a stream. You hear water running under a small bridge somewhere ahead. Behind you, the marshlight does not return. Perhaps it never existed. Perhaps it has found another traveller less cautious, or less fortunate, or simply less well advised by a hungry dog. You climb toward firmer ground with mud heavy on your boots, the red-threaded herbs warm at your wrist, the hazel stick slick in your hand, and the day still hidden behind a sky the colour of watered milk. Ahead, beyond the stream and the willows, the manor road waits, where fog can turn lost animals, stolen goods, and human confusion into matters for judgment beneath smoky rafters. The ground rises from the marsh with the slow kindness of a hand lifting you from cold water. Your boots remain heavy, your cloak hem is dark with mud, and one sock has made the private decision to stay wet until spring, but the path beneath you grows firmer with every step. The willow line falls behind, its bare branches fading into the white air, and the sound of hidden water sinks lower until it becomes only a memory under the fog. Ahead, the manor road appears by pieces a strip of rutted earth, a leaning fence, a stand of winter bare apple trees, and beyond them the low roofs of a village clustered around a hall. Smoke rises from chimneys and then flattens beneath the mist, spreading sideways like grey wool carded across the sky. A few hens scratch in the road with the confidence of creatures who believe all disputes should pause for them. The dog gives them a thoughtful look. The hens give nothing back. Such are the tensions of rural diplomacy. You pass a byre where cattle shift in the dimness, their breath warm and grassy in the cold air. A woman carries 2 wooden pails from a well, a yoke across her shoulders, her skirt pinned high from the mud. A boy drives geese away from a patch of cabbages with a stick and the weary expression of someone already acquainted with injustice. Beside one cottage door, strips of cloth hang drying beneath the eaves, though the fog has clearly decided to dry them in reverse, medieval laundry. You notice is less an activity than a negotiation with weather that rarely signs anything. The village green is not truly green in winter, more a trampled brown space with frost along its edges. At one side stands the manor hall, larger than the cottages but plain, built of timber and plaster, with a stone foundation and a roof darkened by rain. Smoke leaks from a central louver. Near the door, villagers gather in a loose line, murmuring into cloaks and hoods. Today, it seems, is court day. You might have passed by, but the road bends close to the hall, and curiosity, like fog, slips in where it can. A steward stands beneath the porch with a wax tablet, a short staff, and the air of a man who's been asked to settle problems that began before breakfast and will outlive him. Beside him, a reeve from the village holds a tally stick. A manor court is not a king's court with banners and trumpets. It is smaller, smokier, and much more concerned with pigs, fences, debts, stray animals, broken promises, and who fail to repair which ditch. Inside, the hall is warm enough to steam your cloak. Rushes cover the floor, scattered with herbs that cannot quite defeat the smell of damp wool, smoke, and too many boots. A fire burns in the centre hearth, the smoke climbing toward the roof and escaping only after making everyone's eyes water in a democratic fashion. Benches line the walls. At the far end, the steward sits at a table with a horn-ink well, a knife for sharpening quills, and several small piles of coins, pledges, and disputed objects. You take a place near the door, not wanting to be mistaken for someone with legal responsibilities. The dog sits beside your boot, watching the room as if judging the proceedings by scent. Villagers step forward one by one. A man complains that his neighbour's sheep broke into his winter cabbages during the fog. The neighbour says no one can prove they were his sheep, because fog makes all sheep look guilty. This is received with a mixture of agreement and annoyance. The steward asks whether the sheep carried the neighbour's earmark. The first man says they carried their own wool, which should be evidence enough. Law, you learn. Move slowly when livestock lack shame. Another dispute concerns a missing iron pot. A widow says it vanished from her hearth shelf on the night of thick fog. Her cousin says he borrowed it and meant to return it after boiling barley for a sick child. The widow says borrowing without asking is theft, wearing a polite hat. The cousin says kinship should count for something. The widow says it does. It explains why she has not yet struck him with the pot, assuming it is ever found. Even the steward's mouth twitches at that. Some swear the iron pots should never be lent after sunset, because warmth clings to them and carries household luck away. Others say people invented this belief because iron pots are expensive and cousins are unreliable. No one can quite agree which explanation is older. The steward orders the cousin to return the pot by Sunday or pay its value in grain, and the widow nods with the solemn satisfaction of justice measured in cookware. Then the talk turns to fog. A shepherd reports 2 lambs missing from the upper pasture. A carter says he heard wheels near the old lane after midnight, though no cart was due. A girl sent for kindling claims she saw a monk crossing the green before dawn, carrying a small light cupped in his sleeve. At this, the dog lifts its head. The steward asks what sort of monk. The girl shrugs. A dark one. A wet one. All monks look alike in fog, she says, which earns a sharp look from an elderly man who may have a son at the abbey. The girl adds that the monk stopped at the roadside well and dropped something in the mud. Her mother tells her not to invent tales. The girl insists she saw red thread. Your hand moves to your sleeve before you can stop it, where the fennel and rue rest beside the earlier scrap. Even now, it is hard to tell whether this trail of red wool is a warning, a habit, or a coincidence tangled by weather. In a clearer world, perhaps you would dismiss it. But the hall is full of small losses, sheep, pots, tools, coins, trust. Fog has given each of them a hiding place. A peddler steps forward next. He says a strip of wax-sealed linen was offered to him near the marsh path, wrapped as if it were a chapel relic. He refused it, he says proudly, because the man selling it asked too little. This logic impresses several villagers. A true relic, even a doubtful one, should apparently be expensive enough to inspire confidence. The steward leans forward and asks who offered it. The peddler glances toward the door, toward the fog beyond, and says he never saw the face clearly, only a dark robe, a narrow hand, and a smell of bitter herbs. The hall murmurs. The steward orders the reeve to send word to the abbey and to the parish priest. He also orders everyone to stop buying relics from strangers in ditches, a command that sounds obvious only if one has not spent much time among frightened people during fever season. In hard weather, hope becomes a marketable thing. A scrap of linen, a candle stub, a saint's name whispered over wax, these can seem stronger than walls when coughs begin in the night and children grow pale by the hearth. You remain quiet. You're only a traveller, mud-stained and temporary, but the road has placed certain pieces in your keeping: the monk at the gate, the candle in the market, the shrine, the abbey cupboard, the alehouse fleck of wax, the sandal print by the reed hut. Those who tell the tale never fully agree when suspicion becomes knowledge. Perhaps it begins not with proof, but with a dog refusing to trust the same man 3 times. The court breaks for a meal of bread, onions, and ale served from a side table. The steward rubs his eyes. Villagers drift toward the fire, still arguing softly about sheep and relics. You step outside beneath the porch, where fog hangs over the green and the road waits in both directions. A bell sounds faintly from the abbey behind you, answered by the parish bell ahead. Between them, the world seems held in grey cloth. Near the manor steps, half pressed into the mud, lies a small crescent of pale beeswax. The dog sniffs it looks up the road and gives one quiet bark. You lift your hazel stick, settle the damp cloak around your shoulders, and follow the sound of the bell toward the lane where the broken cartwheel, the half-burned candle, and the relic no one trusts are waiting to become part of the same shadow. You leave the manor hall while the villagers still murmur beneath its smoky roof, and the last warmth of the hearth clings to your cloak for only a few steps before the fog takes it back. The lane ahead runs between low fences and winter fields, curving toward the higher road where carts pass between village Abbey Grange and Market Town. It is the kind of lane that looks harmless in daylight and becomes deeply opinionated in weather. Mud fills the wheel ruts. Frost films the puddles. Old hoofprints have frozen at the edges and thawed in the middle, so each step offers a new and personal disappointment. The dog trots ahead, nose low, pausing now and then to look back as if to make sure you are following the plot properly. You carry the hazel stick in one hand, and in your sleeve the fennel and rue have grown warm against your wrist. The little scraps of red thread seem to weigh more than thread should. It is strange how small things gather meaning on a road a knot, a candle end, a footprint, a dog's silence, a monk's quick hand in an alehouse. No one can quite agree whether omens are placed before people, or whether people make omens afterward from whatever they failed to understand at the time. The lane rises past a coppiced wood where hazel poles have been cut and stacked in tidy bundles. Near the ditch, a boy in a brown hood gathers fallen sticks into a sling of cloth. He gives you one glance, gives the dog two, and tells you that the bridge road is blocked by a cart with a broken wheel. He says this with the great satisfaction of someone too young to repair it and old enough to report it. When you ask whose cart, he points with his chin and says the Abbey's, or the miller's, or perhaps the carter from St. Jude's Lane. Then he adds that the wheel is very broken, a technical judgment delivered with confidence. You find it around the next bend. The cart stands tilted beside the ditch, one wheel sunk deep in mud and the other cracked clean through its rim. Its load has been covered with rough canvas tied down by rope, though the canvas has slipped at one corner, revealing sacks, a small locked chest, and bundles wrapped in waxed cloth. A brown horse stands nearby, head lowered, breath steaming, wearing the exhausted patience of an animal who knows human problems are rarely brief. Beside the cart, two men argue over a wooden spoke as though disagreement might repair it. One is the woodcutter from the forest track. His beard is just as wet, his cap just as crooked, and his face carries the stunned expression of a man who has discovered that carts can betray twice in one journey. He recognizes you and lifts both hands, not in greeting exactly, but in surrender to the absurdity of roads. The other man is younger, broad-shouldered, with a miller's pale dust still caught in the seams of his cloak despite the damp. Between them lies the broken wheel, propped on his stone like a wounded shield. The woodcutter says he lent his horse and strength to help the miller carry sacks toward the Abbey Grange, because Christian charity seemed wise at the time. Then the fog thickened, the rut deepened, and the wheel chose martyrdom. The miller says the wheel was old. The woodcutter says the lane is cursed. The horse says nothing, having clearly formed a lower opinion of everyone. You set down your pack and help them unload part of the cart to lighten it. The canvas is stiff with damp. The sacks smell of grain, cold flour, and cellar dust. One waxed bundle smells faintly of herbs, and your hand pauses on it before you can stop yourself. The miller notices and says it holds dried rushes and candle stubs for the Abbey kitchen, gathered from the manor stores. Beeswax scraps are saved and melted again where they can be, because even a candle's last little failure may still be useful. In the Middle Ages, almost everything is used twice, except perhaps good advice, which is used once and regretted later. The locked chest is heavier than it looks. It has iron bands, a small ring handle, and a keyhole dark with grease. The miller says it contains accounts and church plate being moved under seal after rumours of stolen relics. The woodcutter crosses himself at the word relics. He says he wants no traffic with holy bones, holy cloth, or holy anything that can be misplaced and blamed on the nearest man with muddy boots. Some swear stolen relics punish even those who touch their containers. Others say punishment usually arrives in the shape of abbots, stewards, and fines, which are terrible enough. As you lift the sacks to the roadside, the dog noses under the cart and begins scratching at the mud near the broken wheel. The woodcutter tells it not to dig there unless it plans to replace the axle. The dog ignores him with professional focus. Its paw uncovers a small object pressed into the wet earth, a bit of red wool twisted around a flake of hardened wax, and beside it, half hidden under straw, a pilgrim badge. Not just any badge. It is the missing pewter token from the market pilgrim's hat, or very like it worn smooth, its saint almost faceless. The pin at its back bent as if cut free in haste. You lift it gently. Mud fills its grooves. The miller leans close. The woodcutter mutters that fog has begun returning things now, which is never a good sign. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how the badge came to rest beneath the cart. Perhaps it fell from a thief's pouch. Perhaps the suspicious monk dropped it while passing this way. Perhaps some traveller picked it up in the market and lost it here without sin or mystery. Yet the dog sniffs the badge, then the waxed bundle, then the road ahead, and gives the same low sound it gave at the alehouse door. The wheel still needs mending, mystery or not. Survival often refuses to pause for symbolism. You and the others brace the axle with stones, lash the cracked rim with rope, and fit a spare spoke trimmed from a hazel pole. The repair is ugly, temporary, and deeply medieval, which means everyone distrusts it while relying on it completely. The miller smears the binding with tallow to keep the rope from slipping. The woodcutter taps the iron tire with his axe and says his wife would strike it twice for luck. He strikes it 3 times, perhaps from devotion, perhaps from anxiety, perhaps because the wheel looks like it needs encouragement. By the time the cart is steady enough to move, the fog has thickened along the lane. A tower shape begins to show on the ridge ahead, not the abbey now, but a small keep watching the road above the valley. Its upper stones appear first, then vanish, then appear again, as if the fortress is breathing in and out of the mist. The miller says the keep's watchmen have been warned about strangers moving through the fog. They fear thieves, fever, and men who trade in false relics. He suggests you bring the badge and wax there before night closes fully. You tuck the muddy pilgrim badge into a scrap of cloth, beside the red threads and herbs already in your keeping. The dog steps close, pressing its damp shoulder against your boot. Behind you, the repaired cart begins to creak forward, slow and uncertain, every turn of the wheel sounding like a complaint written in wood. Ahead, torchlight flickers faintly on the ridge. So you climb toward it, leaving the broken lane, the tired horse, and the temporary repair behind, while the fog gathers around the keep walls and hides whatever waits beneath their watch. The road to the keep climbs slowly, as if the hill itself is tired of being climbed and would rather be left to its sheep, its stones, and its old winter grass. The fog thickens with the height instead of thinning, which feels unfair. You had hoped that rising ground might lift you above the white damp, but the mist merely comes with you, clinging to hedges, crawling over the road, and gathering in the folds of your cloak. Your boots drag mud from the broken cart lane, The hazel stick taps before you. The dog walks close at your left heel, no longer pretending this journey is a pleasant hunt for scraps. Above, the keep appears in pieces, a wall, then nothing, a square tower, then only fog, a torch on the battlement, then a blurred orange stain. It is not a great lord's castle with banners snapping and halls full of jewelled cups. It is smaller, harder, more practical, a stone keep with a timber outer palisade, a gatehouse, a yard, a stable, a well, a storehouse, and enough cold corners to humble any romantic imagination. Such places are built less for beauty than for the stubborn idea that someone someday may try to get in without permission. A horn sounds from the wall when you near the gate. It is not loud, but in the fog it seems to come from everywhere at once. A voice calls for you to stand and name yourself. You stop beneath the shadow of the gatehouse, though the shadow itself is mostly guesswork. The dog stops too, looking upward. A guard leans from the parapet with a lantern hooked on a pole, trying to see your face through the mist. His helmet has a strip of cloth tied beneath it to keep the cold metal from biting his ears. It gives him the look of a man wearing both armour and regret. You explain that you come from the Manor Road with word of a broken cart, a missing pilgrim badge, red thread, and possibly a relic thief moving through the fog. This is not the sort of introduction that encourages trust, but it is too late to invent a better one. The guard asks whether you have fever. You say no. He asks whether the dog has fever. The dog sneezes. The guard considers this answer with the seriousness of an official mind. At last the gate opens enough for you to enter the outer yard. The portcullis here is smaller than the town's, but its teeth are no friendlier. Inside, the yard is churned with mud and straw. Horses stamp in a lean-to stable. A rack of spears stands beneath an awning. Barrels sit under canvas near the storehouse, and a boy carries firewood toward the hall with arms full and dignity endangered. Torches burn in iron brackets, their flames flattened by damp air. Fog curls along the ground, so that every boot seems to step from a little cloud. The captain of the watch meets you beneath the gatehouse arch. She's broad-shouldered, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, and wears a leather belt heavy with keys, knife, whistle, and a small wooden tally for guard turns. Her hair is tucked under a wool cap. Her eyes move first to your hands, then to your boots, then to the dog, then back to your face. Watchmen learn to read weather, posture, and lies in roughly that order. You give her the muddy badge wrapped in cloth, the red wool scrap, and the flake of wax. She studies each by torchlight. The badge she recognises as a pilgrim token often sold in the town market. The wax is beeswax, better than most poor folk waste on ordinary light. The red thread makes her frown. Some swear red thread binds sickness away from a house, she says, or marks goods carried under blessing, or warns honest folk not to touch what belongs to the church. Others use it because people notice red. No one can quite agree whether charms protect the innocent or advertise to the guilty. A bell rings somewhere beyond the yard, perhaps from the chapel inside the keep, perhaps from the abbey far below. The fog twists the sound so strangely that men turn their heads in different directions. The captain glances toward the wall. She says fog is the enemy of any watch, not because it attacks, but because it persuades the eye to forgive too much. A ladder can lean against a wall before a sentry sees it. A stranger can cross a ditch. A sick traveller can reach the gate. A thief can follow a supply cart. Even a friend can be mistaken for danger, which is how ordinary nights become lifelong regrets. She orders one guard to check the rear postern and another to walk the wall with a lantern. Then she takes you toward the hall, where warmth and news are both kept. You pass a chapel door standing ajar. Inside, a small lamp burns before a painted saint, and strips of linen hang near the altar as offerings from those who came praying for healed lungs, safe childbirth, sound cattle, or a son returned from war. A reliquary shelf stands behind an iron grill. The captain notices you looking and says every church, chapel, and abbey within 2 days' walk has been warned since the rumour began. False relics draw crowds, stolen relics draw trouble, full stolen relics draw both, which is a very medieval sort of efficiency. The hall is long, low, and smoky, with shields on the walls and rushes on the floor. Supper's not fully ended. Men-at-arms sit with wooden bowls of pottage, trenchers of coarse bread, onions, ale, and a little smoked fish. A clerk near the hearth writes notes on a wax tablet, warming the stylus in his hand before each mark. At the far end, the steward of the keep listens as the captain explains your arrival. He is older, thin-faced, wrapped in a dark cloak edged with worn fur, and his chair is close enough to the fire to suggest both rank and aching knees. You repeat the tale once more: the monk at the town gate, the candle in the market, the shrine, the abbey guest house, the infirmary, the alehouse, the marsh footprint, the manor court, the cart, the badge. As you speak, the dog lies under the table but keeps its eyes fixed on the door. Even now, it is hard to tell whether you sound like a careful witness or a tired traveller who has spent too many hours in fog and begun stitching the world together with red thread. The steward does not mock you. That is either wisdom or concern. Before he can answer, a shout rises from outside. Not a scream, not a battle cry, just a guard's sharp call, clipped by fog. The captain is already moving before the second shout comes. You follow with the others into the yard, where torches flare and shadows blur against the walls. At the outer gate stands a figure in a dark robe, hands raised, hood wet with mist. The monk. He's breathing hard, as though he has climbed the hill quickly. One sleeve is torn. Mud streaks the hem of his robe. In his hands he carries a small wax-sealed case bound with red thread. The dog begins to growl. The monk says he has come to place the relic under guard before thieves take it from him. His voice is steady, but his eyes shine with fear, or fever, or reflected torchlight. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which. The captain takes one step forward, sword still sheathed, and asks why an honest monk would travel all day through fog with a hidden relic and no escort. The monk looks past her, toward you, toward the dog, toward the half-lit chapel door behind the yard. Because, he says softly, I no longer know who at the abbey is honest. The fog presses close around the keep walls, swallowing the road below, the fields, the marsh, the forest, and every answer not yet spoken. For a long moment, no one in the yard moves. The torches lean and shiver in the damp air. The monk stands before the gate with the wax-sealed case in both hands, red thread crossing it like a small wound. The captain of the watch studies him without reaching for it. The steward has come from the hall wrapped in his fur-edged cloak, his face half lost behind his own breath. Men-at-arms gather near the spear rack. The dog remains at your side, low in the shoulders, growling as though the fog itself has finally taken a shape it dislikes. The monk lowers his eyes. He says his name is Brother Ansel, though names given in torchlight always feel less solid than names spoken at noon. He was sent from the abbey with wax, linen, and accounts for the town grange, but at the market he learned that someone had begun selling protections against fog fever under the name of the abbey's relics. He followed whispers, he says, through the shrine road, the alehouse, the marsh edge, and the manor lane. He kept the case hidden because he feared the thief would trade a false one for the true. No one can quite agree, standing there in the wet yard, whether this sounds brave, foolish, or exactly what a guilty man would say after being followed by a dog with strong opinions. The captain does not take the case bare-handed. She asks for a cloth. A guard brings one from the chapel door, and she wraps the little box before lifting it. The seal is pressed with an abbey mark, a small cross and crook, softened by damp but still visible. The red thread is not decorative now, it binds the lid tightly. Some swear red thread keeps sickness out of holy wrappings, especially when linen is used for healing prayers. Others use it simply because red is hard to lose in straw, rushes, mud, or guilt. Medieval usefulness and superstition often share the same cloak and refuse to say which one entered first. The steward orders the monk brought inside, not to the hall, but to the chapel porch, where the lamp burns before the painted saint and the iron grill protects the reliquary shelf. Brother Ansel sits on a bench there, watched by 2 guards. His hands tremble when he folds them. You notice how tired he looks now that he's still road mud on his sandals, a scratch across one wrist, fog beading on the wool of his robe. The dog watches him from the threshold, no longer growling. Though not forgiving either. Dogs, like village courts, prefer evidence they can smell. The captain asks you to speak again, more slowly this time, and the clerk writes it on a wax tablet. The half-burned candle, the missing pilgrim badge, the red thread at the shrine, the fleck of wax in the alehouse, the sandal print by the marsh hut, the badge beneath the broken cart. Each small thing enters the record as a line pressed into wax, temporary yet official, which seems fitting for a night when nothing holds its shape. The clerk's stylus squeaks. He warms the tablet near the torch when the wax stiffens. A very cold legal system, you decide, is mostly men heating things so arguments can continue. The monk gives his own account. He says the half-burned candle was used to soften a seal on a false relic case, which he found in the town market but lost while pursuing the seller through the press of stalls and fog. The pilgrim badge, he claims, must have been used by the thief as proof of holy travel, for a pilgrim's tokens open doors that a stranger's face cannot. As for the red wool, he says the abbey infirmary binds such thread around fever charms with the poor in winter. Though never for sale, and never with promises stronger than prayer, even now it is hard to tell whether his tale cleans the pattern or merely rearranges the knots. Night gathers fully around the keep. The fog hides the road below so completely that the world beyond the palisade seems erased. The captain sends extra men to the wall and asks whether you will sit near the watchfire until dawn, in case more questions come. It is not exactly a request, but it is gentler than a command. You agree, partly because the hall is crowded, partly because the road is impossible, and partly because, after all this mist and mud, a fire with a wall around it feels like luxury. The watchfire burns in a brazier near the inner side of the gate. You sit on a low bench with your cloak wrapped around you and the dog pressed against your boot. The captain stands nearby, listening to reports from the wall. A guard says he heard steps below the ditch. Another says it was water dripping from the hoarding. A third says water does not mutter. The captain tells him fog mutters when men are tired, which may be the kindest answer available. Above you, lanterns move along the battlement, small yellow eyes in the white dark. The watchmen carry spears, horns, and shields strapped across their backs. Fog makes the wall feel less like a defence and more like a narrow island. Every sound grows uncertain. Horse breath from the stable, straw shifting under boots, the creak of the gate chain, the soft cough of a guard, a distant branch breaking somewhere below. Some swear that calling out into fog invites an answer from things better left unnamed. The captain calls out anyway, because wages, walls, and responsibility leave little room for elegant fear. A servant brings hot ale in wooden cups, spiced lightly with sage and a little honey from the keep stores. The honey is so small a mercy that everyone notices it. You drink slowly, feeling warmth settle in your stomach. The dog receives a crust from the servant and accepts it like tribute from a loyal subject. Across the yard, Brother Ansel remains in the chapel porch, head bowed, guarded but not chained. The wax-sealed case rests behind the iron grill until a priest and the abbey's men can judge it by daylight. The bells sound after midnight. First the chapel bell, close and thin, then, much later, the abbey bell far below, floating through fog as though from under water. The notes overlap strangely, and for a moment you cannot tell which comes from stone, which from memory, and which from the damp air itself. The red-threaded herbs in your sleeve have lost much of their scent, but when you lift your wrist, a faint trace of rue remains. You think of the old woman at the shrine, the peasants in the frosted fields, the infirmer's careful hands, the alehouse voices, the marshlight drifting away from the broken path. All of them feared fog differently, and all of them were right. Near morning, the fog grows colder. It beads on your lashes and gathers silver on the fur lining of the captain's cloak. No attack comes, no thief climbs the wall, no ghost asks directions. Only the waiting itself remains, slow and heavy, while men listen so hard that every silence becomes crowded. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the hidden threat that night was the monk, the thief, the stolen relic, the fever, the marsh, or simply the way fog makes fear walk closer to the heart. You lean nearer the brazier as the fire lowers into red coals. The dog sleeps at last, paws twitching, perhaps chasing a pig through a clearer market than any you have seen. The captain smiles at that, just barely. Somewhere beyond the wall, before dawn has colour, a cock crows once from the invisible village below. The fog does not lift yet, but it loosens. The loosening begins so gently that you notice it first, not with your eyes, but with your breath. The air entering your lungs feels less like wet wool and more like morning. The fog still lies thick against the keep walls, still hangs in the yard, still blurs the watchman on the battlement into hooded shapes, yet its grip has softened. Somewhere beyond the gate, the unseen valley is beginning to remember its own edges. You sit beside the watchfire as the coals settle into a deep red glow. The dog sleeps against your boot, warm and heavy, its folded ear twitching at some dream of bread, fish skin, or possibly the escaped pig from the market square. The captain of the watch stands nearby with her cloak drawn close, looking toward the outer gate. Her eyes are tired, but not careless. Medieval mornings after anxious nights do not arrive with trumpets. They arrive with stiff backs, damp socks, cold fingers, and someone quietly asking whether there is any ale left. A guard comes down from the wall and reports that the road below can be seen in patches now. The ditch, the first bend, the blackthorn hedge, and the old marker stone have returned one by one, like guilty men stepping out of hiding. No stranger waits there. No ladder leans against the wall. No thief crouches beneath the palisade. The fog has hidden many things, but not everything it hides is wicked. Sometimes it hides only emptiness, which is almost disappointing after a night spent imagining better organized dangers. The chapel bell rings for morning prayer, thin and clear in the cold. This time the sound does not wander so strangely. It rises from the little chapel and stays where it belongs. The abbey bell answers from below, distant but steadier now, and you can almost picture the monastery waking monks crossing the cloister, the infirmera checking the carter's breathing, the young scribe rubbing sleep from ink-stained eyes, the lay brother unlocking doors with his heavy ring of keys. No one can quite agree whether bells keep the world in order or merely remind frightened people that order may still be hoped for. Either way, you are grateful for them. Brother Ansel is brought from the chapel porch after prayer. In the clearer light, he looks less like a shadow and more like a weary man who has made several poor travel decisions for reasons that may not have been entirely foolish. The priest from the keep examines the wax-sealed case without opening it, then compares the abbey mark with the seal kept in the chapel chest. The captain watches every motion. The steward warms his hands under his cloak and mutters that holy objects create more paperwork than goats, and goats at least provide milk when they are troublesome. The case is judged likely true, though not opened until the abbey's own men arrive. Brother Ansel is not freed exactly, but neither is he bound. His tale will need testing by daylight. Who sent him? Who sold the false charms? Who cut the pilgrim badge? Who moved through the marsh and manor road under the cover of fog? Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether Ansel's a brave monk, a frightened messenger, or a man who has stepped too close to deception and come away stained by its smoke. For now, he is given bread, watered ale, and a bench near the chapel door. In this world, even suspicion must eat. You step outside the gate when it opens at last. The captain lets you go with a nod and returns the pilgrim badge wrapped in cloth, asking that you carry it back toward the market if your road leads that way. The red-threaded herbs remain tucked in your sleeve, faded and soft now, their work either finished or never begun. The hazel stick is muddy, scratched, and dependable. The dog wakes, stretches, yawns with unearned drama, and follows you through the gate as though it has always intended to escort you down into morning. The valley below slowly appears. First the road, then the hedges, then roofs of the manor village shining damp beneath pale light. Beyond them, the marsh lies flat and silver, less haunted now, though you remember the broken causeway and do not trust its beauty too much. Farther still, the forest forms a dark band, and beyond that, hidden by distance, the town waits with its market, gates, rush-strewn halls, false measures, honest hunger, and people already preparing to tell yesterday's fog into larger shape. You descend carefully. Frost melts in the grass. Crows lift from a field and cross the sky in a ragged line. A peasant opens a byre door. Smoke rises straight for a moment before spreading. Near the road, the old marker stone is slick with dew, and someone has left a pebble upon it, perhaps for safe passage, perhaps because stones invite other stones in the quiet logic of travellers. Some swear that leaving a token behind keeps danger from following. Others say it only proves you own something small enough to spare. You leave nothing except a brief touch of your fingers on the cold stone. The dog trots ahead, then pauses and looks back. The fog has not vanished entirely. It lingers in hollows, beneath hedges, along the stream, and in the low fields where sheep begin to move like woolly thoughts through the morning. Yet the hidden threats have become ordinary again: mud, cold, hunger, false bargains, poor roads, illness, greed, fear, and the uncertain hearts of people met in passing. The mist did not create them. It merely taught you how near they always were. And still, the world is gentle now. The road opens. The bells are softer. The keep behind you grows smaller, its torchlight gone, its walls no longer floating but firmly set upon the hill. You carry with you the smell of wet wool, beeswax, smoke, pottage, bitter herbs, cold stone, and dawn over fields. You carry the memory of a half-burned candle, a relic no one trusts entirely, a suspicious monk who may yet prove honest, and a dog that has followed you through every grey uncertainty with the solemn devotion of a creature hoping for breakfast. The path bends toward the valley and you follow it down. The fog thins to ribbons along the grass. The morning grows pale and mild. Your steps become slower, no longer pressed by danger or doubt, only guided by the easy pull of the road and the quiet warmth left from the watchfire. Behind you, the keep rests on its hill. Before you, the fields spread open, damp and silver, with the first birds moving softly between hedge and sky. You breathe in, and the air is cool, but kind. The dog walks beside you now without urgency, its paws dark with mud, its head low, its body calm. The bells fade into the distance, not gone, only softened, as though wrapped in wool and laid gently beside the sleeping world. The red thread in your sleeve no longer feels like a warning, it feels like a small remembered kindness from a shrine beneath a hawthorn tree. Soon, the road will lead to bread, to fire, to a bench near a wall, to a cup warmed between both hands. Soon, the last of the fog will lift from the river and the reeds, from the market roofs and abbey stones, from the wheel ruts and the old forest track. What was hidden will become ordinary again. What was frightening will become a tale told quietly in winter, when candles burn low and travellers lean closer to hear. For now, you need only walk a little farther. The valley breathes around you. Smoke rises. Frost loosens. The world settles into morning with the deep, slow patience of old stone. You are safe enough for this moment, warm enough in your cloak, and tired enough to let the road carry your thoughts away. The dog stays near. The bells are far. The mist becomes light, and the light becomes stillness. So you let the medieval world soften at its edges, the keep, the marsh, the forest, the shrine, the abbey, and the town all fade into a quiet grey distance. The road beneath your feet grows dimmer, gentler, warmer, until it is hardly a road at all, but only a path through sleep. The last candle burns low. The last bell trembles once and disappears. The fog no longer hides anything. It becomes a blanket, soft and pale, drawn slowly over the fields, over the roofs, over the tired horses and sleeping hearths, over your own quiet breathing. And there, in the hush before full day, you may rest.